Okay, in this video we are going to talk about something called the difference of two functions. So we've got f of x and we've got g of x, and what we want to find is f minus g of x. And can you see that? Yes. Okay, so what that is equal to is f of x minus g of x. So I give you a function f of x, I give you a function g of x. I ask you to find me f minus g of x. You just say, well, that's f of x minus g of x. So let's take a look at an example, and hopefully this will get to make a little more sense. So let's do f of x equals 5x minus 10, and g of x is x minus 2. So I'm just using the same f of x and the same g of x from my adding two functions together video. So if you haven't seen that, you can check it out. It's pretty much the same idea as the subtraction of two functions. So let's give this a shot. So our formula says that f minus g of x is f of x. In this case, our f of x is 5x minus 10 minus g of x. In this case, our g of x is x minus 2. So we've got 5x minus 10. I'm going to leave the brackets on just for a sec, and you'll see why in a minute. So I've got my negative sign in here. So I need to distribute that into everything inside my second set of brackets. So I've got negative 1 times x would just be negative x. Negative 1 times negative 2 would just be positive 2. So remember, if you see a negative sign by itself, there's an imaginary 1 that goes just before the brackets. So I can drop my brackets now because I've dealt with my negative sign, and let's just simplify this as much as we can. So I've got 5x minus x. That's just going to be 4x. Got negative 10 plus 2. That would just be negative 8. And I think that's as far as I'm going to simplify it. Is that as far? Yeah, that's, well, I mean, you could divide both of them by 4, go x minus 2. But in my opinion, this is not simpler. So I would call that our final answer. So let's do one that's a little bit more complex. So I don't know, I'm just going to make it up. Let's do f of x equals, I don't know, 6 over x squared, and g of x is, I don't know, x squared over, let's go 6x squared over x. Obviously you could simplify that down farther and just get 6x, but we're just going to leave it as a fraction just so I can show you what to do when you have an x and an x squared as the denominators in your fraction. And so let's go, we want to find f minus g of x, so we're going to take our f of x, 6 over x squared, shouldn't really do arrows, you should do equals sign, I should too, minus 6x squared over x. So the first thing I'm going to do is think, how do I subtract two things that are fractions? This isn't any different than if I said, what's a half minus a third? Now I have a video on subtracting fractions. If you're not that familiar with it, you can check that out. But all you do is you find a common denominator. So in this case, I've got x squared on the denominator of my first fraction, x on the denominator of my second fraction. They are not like terms, so I need to make them into like terms. So I'm thinking, why don't I just multiply them by each other? So the fraction with x squared on the bottom, I'm going to multiply by x over x. The x comes from the denominator in this fraction, and x over x, anything divided by itself, is just 1. And then this fraction I'm going to multiply by the denominator on this guy, x squared over x squared, which is just, the equivalent of 1. So, when I do that, I've got 6 times x. I should also mention to you guys, multiplying fractions might be worth just mentioning as well. If I've got like 3 over 6 times a quarter, not any different than what we're doing up here. All you do, you take the stuff on the top, 3 times 1, that's just 3. Take the stuff on the bottom, 6 times 4, that's just 24, and you'd have 3 over 24. So when you multiply fractions, multiply the stuff on the top, and multiply the stuff on the bottom. So I've got 6 times x on the top, that's just 6x, and on the bottom I've got x squared times x, that would just be x cubed, minus, on the top over here, I've got 6x squared times x squared. X squared times x squared, remember from our exponent rules, you add the exponents together. So I've got 2 plus 2, that becomes 4. So this is 6x to the power of 4 over x times x squared would be x cubed. So now that I've got a common denominator, I can, well, it's 30, no, it's okay. I was running out of time. So now I'm just going to combine them. The denominator is the same, so I'm just going to write it down once. And then on the top I would have 6x minus 6x to the 4th. And you could factor out a 6x if you wanted. And then 6x divided by 6x would be 1. Minus 6x to the 4 divided by 6x would just be what? X to the 3 over x cubed. And then you could cancel out the x term up here with one of our x's down here, and it would be 6 times 1 minus x cubed over x squared, and that would be your final answer. So, if you're still not sure about adding, dividing, or multiplying with, what are these called? Functions, you can check out my video on those. So, as always, head to my website if you've got any questions, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!